With the revelation of the sanguine orb's existence and the imminent threat it posed, Peter found himself in an unlikely alliance with Anastasia, the head of the Vampire Council. Their differences seemed trivial compared to the looming danger that threatened the existence of all vampires. Together, they planned their strategy. It was a daunting task, but they were determined. As the day of the battle dawned, Peter stood at the front of their combined forces. His heart pounded in his chest, but he knew there was no turning back. With a final glance at Anastasia, he gave the signal, and they charged into the fray. The battle was fierce and brutal. Vampires from both sides clashed, their fangs bared and claws extended. Amidst the chaos, Peter and Anastasia fought side by side, their focus on reaching the rogue vampires. As they sliced through their enemies, they could feel the power of the sanguine orb growing stronger. It pulsed with a dark energy that sent shivers down Peter's spine. They had to stop it before it was too late. Finally, they reached the rogue vampires. They were surrounding the orb, chanting in an ancient language. The orb pulsed faster, its energy threatening to explode. With a primal roar, Peter launched himself at the rogues. He fought with everything he had, his grief for Serafina and his desire to protect his kind fueling him. Anastasia joined him, her own strength matching his easily. One by one, the rogue vampires fell until only the leader was left. He was stronger than the others, his eyes glowing with the power of the orb. But Peter and Anastasia, working together, managed to strike him down. The leader fell, and the orb's pulsing slowed. Anastasia turned to him, a hint of respect in her eyes. "We did well, Peter," she said. Peter nodded, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. They had won. They had stopped the rogue vampires and saved their kind. As they stood amidst the aftermath of the battle, Peter couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. They had faced a monumental threat and had come out victorious. And perhaps, just maybe, this alliance with Anastasia and the Council could be the beginning of the change Serafina had dreamed of. But for now, they would return to Veilcrest, victorious but forever changed by the battle they had fought. Unbeknownst to them, one rogue vampire had survived. He had managed to escape the battlefield unnoticed, taking the sanguine orb with him. His destination was the Council's castle, specifically, the ancient graveyard that lay in its shadow. The graveyard was a sacred place, where the oldest vampires were laid to rest. Among them was Victor, the progenitor of all vampires, the original one. His crypt lay at the very heart of the graveyard, untouched for centuries. The rogue vampire, his eyes glowing with determination, placed the sanguine orb inside Victor's crypt. As the orb's dark energy pulsed, it began to seep into the ground, making its way to Victor's remains. Slowly, the ground began to tremble, and a low, ominous sound filled the air. Then, with a sudden burst of power, Victor's crypt burst open, and a figure slowly rose from it. Victor, the first vampire, was awake. His eyes glowed with an ancient power as he took in his surroundings. The rogue vampire bowed before him, pledging his allegiance. Victor merely nodded, his focus on the orb. As Victor absorbed the power of the orb, his strength grew exponentially. The rogue vampire watched in awe as Victor, fully restored, stepped out of the crypt. His first act was to raise his hand, and as he did, the ground shook, and the other graves in the cemetery began to burst open. One by one, the ancient vampires, long considered deceased, rose from their graves. Their eyes glowed with the same ancient power as Victor's. The rogue vampire could only watch in both terror and awe as the army of the dead formed before him. Back in Veilcrest, Peter and Anastasia felt a sudden surge of power. They exchanged worried glances, both knowing something had gone terribly wrong. As they set out to investigate, they were unaware of the grave danger they were about to face. Victor, the original vampire, had returned. And with him, an army of the undead, ready to reclaim what was once theirs. The battle for Veilcrest was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning.